You know what one good thing about this movie being delayed 17 times for 17 years is? I have 60 billion trailers worth of footage to use in this review. Yay! Welcome back to Access Blockbusters. If you haven't been here before, then please make sure to consider hitting subscribe, like the video, and comment down below with what you thought about this newest Marvel installment. This video is going to be non-spoiler and then spoilers for Black Widow. And I will clearly delineate when the spoilers begin. So if you haven't seen Black Widow and you want to avoid all spoilers, fear not. I will not be giving away anything that we haven't seen from the trailers in this first part of the video. Let's get into it. So Black Widow is directed by Kate Shortland and follows the adventures of Natasha Romanoff after the events of Captain America Civil War, as she is on the run from the government and she goes back to finish something that she had started a long time ago. And in the meantime, she finds her members of her old family. Now let me get one thing out of the way really quickly. This movie, I think 100% would have been 10,000 times better if it were released in 2016. Imagine you have Captain America Civil War in May, and then you have Doctor Strange in November, but sandwiched in the middle, maybe in August or July, you have Black Widow. Trust me, that would have made a huge difference because, and spoilers if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, the one person out there who hasn't, but Natasha is dead. She is dead. And so everything that happens in Black Widow, while I wouldn't say is inconsequential, it still feels a little weird because we know where Natasha's journey ends. And I feel like if this movie were released earlier in the timeline order when it was supposed to be released and take place, I feel like it would have made the film a lot more engaging and satisfying. All that being said, I thought this film was fantastic. I am not going to pull any punches because I was expecting a sort of middle-of-the-ground MCU film, and when I came out of the theater, because yes, I did go to the theater, so excited, so happy to be in the theaters again, I thought about the movie I just watched, and I went, that movie was excellent. Now, is this the next Avengers Endgame? Absolutely not. Is this the next Spider-Man Homecoming for me? Nope. But it has to be one of the highest-ranked solo films, behind films like Black Panther and Spider-Man Homecoming. It really, for me, was one of the better solo films that the MCU has ever done. Now, obviously, this film is called Black Widow, so let's talk about Scarlett Johansson. I don't necessarily think that this is her best performance as Black Widow, but I do absolutely think she carries the weight of the lead role as well as anyone could have, and she gives some great emotional scenes when she has to. She brings the humor, the action, the heart, the feels whenever the script calls for it. And I thought she did a fantastic job. I think for me, as an audience member, and just me personally, I really started to get attached to this character in Avengers Endgame, which made her death a little bit jarring to me and maybe not as emotional as it could have been. And so that's why I was sort of saying, if this film came before in the correct order, then I feel like it would have had more weight when she died in Endgame. That being said, she carries her performance right over from Endgame and brings all that emotional gravitas that we thought was so great in that film. I thought she was fantastic. In terms of the other characters, obviously all of the critics have been raving about Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova, and I have nothing new to add to that because I thought she was also excellent in the film. Obviously, she is being set up to be a bigger part of the MCU moving forward, but it doesn't necessarily feel like she's being shoehorned in there just so that she can get her own time to shine in the future. No, she did a fantastic job in the movie, in the role that she was given. On top of that, I thought Rachel Weisz and David Harbour also did great jobs. I thought Rachel Weisz was maybe a little underutilized in the movie, which, okay, there wasn't room for everybody. And I thought that David Harbour had some really great scenes, but you didn't quite get that full emotional weight that you wanted from him. I mean, he was very funny, but there were times in the film where he had very emotional moments, and I thought that they were going to really break through, and he almost did, but then they just cut away, and it was a little disappointing to me. Now, in terms of the villain, from the trailers, we've seen Taskmaster, and I'm going to talk about Taskmaster without spoiling anything that you haven't seen from the trailers, which, again, is basically nothing other than the Taskmaster can copy the moves of the Avengers. Now, to give some context, I had been hearing from some critics that Taskmaster, the reveal of who this person is, was akin to Trevor Slattery in Iron Man 3, which, again, I am not the biggest fan of, but I don't hate either. But I know that it was extremely divisive at the time. I remember that. And even the people who loved Black Widow and thought the Taskmaster reveal was okay still said it was pretty disappointing. And so I went into the film with my expectations way lower than it probably initially would have. And I honestly have no idea what they're talking about. I thought the Taskmaster reveal, while it wasn't breathtaking or groundbreaking cinema, was fine. And honestly, I can go as far to say it was good. It is nothing close to Trevor Slattery. I have no idea what those people are talking about. I legitimately don't. Now, I've had only good things to say about this movie thus far. I do have some slight issues with the film, though. One being that while it is very quick, and I think that works to its benefit because the film is very, very fast-paced, it also kind of feels like it breezes by without too much weight to it, which is a very interesting thing. And I always have this thing where I watch movies for the first time, and it kind of feels like, oh, I'm just kind of floating along, listening to the plot and watching the characters speak to each other and watching the action, and not really getting a sense of the movie. But I really did feel that for this one. It just breezed by. And I think the reason for that is because while the movie overall was very consistently good, it never quite had that oomph moment. Like, it never had that scene, like in Captain America Civil War, where I remember sitting in the theater and watching the airport scene and going, oh my goodness, this film is amazing. Or in Infinity War, when Thor enters Wakanda, and I remember going, oh my goodness. Or in Endgame, obviously, with portals. It just didn't quite have that oomph factor. Some of that, I think, can be attributed to the action scenes. Now, there are a lot of action scenes in this film, and almost all of them are excellent. In fact, I would say all of them were excellently shot. It's just they never quite had the rhythm or cadence to really feel the weight of it all. And I'm going to go back to Taskmaster for just a second because I thought Taskmaster was great, and seeing this character flip out and do all the Avengers moves and all that, well, that was awesome. But they never really felt like they had a true moment to shine, and that was a little bit disappointing, to be quite honest. I feel like that's the disappointing part of the character, not necessarily who the character is. And I also sort of feel like in terms of pacing that the film's second and third acts sort of meld together in a very interesting way. And that sort of contributes to why the film felt very short and not necessarily rushed, but just short to me. Because I feel like the first act was very clearly defined and I loved it. And then the second act, I was having a really good time. And then it sort of just rushed in and melded into the third act. And I was like, oh, we're already here. We're already at the climax. Okay, got it. But look, all that aside, at the end of the day, I think Black Widow is an excellent solo movie. In fact, I think it's just an excellent MCU movie. It really delves into the past of Natasha Romanoff, and this is one thing I really love about the film. It doesn't feel forced in most places because it's gonna make you change the way you think about certain moments in the MCU, and I really love that. I heard the director saying that before this movie came out, and I kind of thought, how true could that possibly be? But now I'm thinking back to other lines in other MCU films and going, wow, I just didn't realize that that's what that meant. I do wish the film came out in 2016 or 2017. I wish that we got this one before Natasha met her end in Avengers Endgame. That being said, the character was developed really nicely in this movie. It has a lot of really interesting setup for the future of the MCU. And overall, that 2 hours to 2.5 hours flew by. It was excellent. It felt like Mission Impossible in a Marvel movie. I loved it. And I'm still seriously considering whether or not to keep the rating system, but the MCU is back, and so the rating system is back. I'm going to give Black Widow a B and an 8 out of 10. And yes, this movie was meant to be seen in a theater. I could not imagine seeing this at home. Seriously. All right, we're going to move on to the spoiler section now. So if you haven't seen Black Widow yet, and you don't want to be spoiled, we are going to be talking heavy spoilers for Black Widow in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You have officially been warned. Let's talk Black Widow spoilers. Okay, yeah, so Dreykov's daughter is Taskmaster. Why is anybody really upset about this? I get it, it's not this huge, big reveal that maybe some people were expecting, but I feel like that's a classic case of expectations versus reality. I was expecting something really bad, actually, because of what all the critics were saying, and when it turned out to be Dreykov's daughter, I was like, oh, that's good. I enjoy that reveal. And honestly, there isn't that much else to spoil about the movie. I mean, we can talk about the ending where Red Guardian, Melina, and Yelena fly off with all the other Black Widows. I think that's probably setting up a Black Widow sequel. I also think that it's going to be interesting to see when Red Guardian comes up next, because I think he and Yelena will obviously be in upcoming MCU projects. I'm not sure about Melina per se. But I did think it was interesting that they kept Red Guardian alive, and I have a theory, and this could just be completely off base, because clearly if you've listened to the last episode Access Blockbusters pod, me and CM's theories, we were just all over the place. But I think that Red Guardian being a super soldier, it would make a lot of sense for him to show up the next time that Zemo does, because obviously Zemo has this vendetta against super soldiers, John Walker's still out there, and now you have Red Guardian. And I mean, again, we talked about this in Falcon and the Winter Soldier reviews. I don't know how much I like all these super soldiers running around because it just feels like it makes Steve a little less special, but all that aside. And speaking of when we'll see characters next, let's talk about the post-credits scene. It was just one, and I think it was a very good one. It's a very solid one. We haven't really had a very hard-hitting post-credit scene in a long while, actually. I don't think any post-credit scene in Phase 4 has been really that memorable, to be quite honest, which is kind of a bummer, because if you think back to Phase 1 of the MCU, you had the Iron Man post-credit scene, which was huge. It was Tony finding out about the Avengers Initiative, and so on with Thanos and the Avengers, but, you know, we've had some good ones, and this was another solid one with Val showing up again. Again, I still am not a huge fan of Julia Louis-Dreyfus playing this character, but she's going to be around, so might as well get used to her. And I was watching this scene and I thought, yep, she's going to send her after Hawkeye. Sure enough, she sends her after Hawkeye. So she, Yelena, being she, is going to be in Hawkeye, which we already knew, and she is apparently going to be hunting him down, which I think is a really interesting angle, because the way that Val said it is, do you want to go after the person who's responsible for her death? And I mean, that's technically not true, but you can see how people would see it that way. So I think it's a very interesting angle to take. And honestly, there isn't that much to spoil. I mean, I thought the beginning opening scene in Ohio and that whole arc with the family, I thought that was really nicely done. That it wasn't actually her family, but Florence Pugh's Yelena really thought it was. Natasha was really attached to that family, and they all sort of became that family at the end of the film. I thought that was really good. I had no idea who Mason was. For those of you who don't know who Mason is, because I don't remember them saying his name in the entire film, here's him in his own character poster, because why does he have his own character poster if he was literally just a plot device the entire movie? I have no idea. And other than that, I mean, maybe Taskmaster shows up again, not entirely sure, but honestly, I'm kind of getting used to this whole going back to smaller solo adventures for the characters, like WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, maybe not so much, but it is still pretty contained, relatively speaking, and now Black Widow. I'm actually really enjoying the fact that these huge Avenger characters don't just show up randomly in the movies. It's about Natasha. It's called Black Widow, and I really enjoyed that. Did I kind of think that Sam Wilson or Steve Rogers would show up at the end? Yeah, but, you know, it's alright. And that'll about do it for my review about Black Widow. Again, I enjoyed the film immensely. I thought it was going to be a pretty middle-of-the-road movie. Turns out, I had a great time. So I want to know, what do you guys think about Black Widow? Did you enjoy it? Did you not like it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe and give this video a like to join the Access Blockbusters crew. If you want to check out some more videos, check out the videos on the screen right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.